graduated from Temple in 2011 with a major in HR and a minor in management information systems at the time. My first job out of college was actually an internship with a retail company in Center City. It was great because it was close to the city, and my job duties there as the intern was actually just coordinating duties. So it was being a file clerk, doing data entry, kind of just researching and helping out in the HR department wherever they needed, but mainly it was making sure that all the files were together and answering general HR questions. From there, they brought me on full-time as an HR generalist, and one of my big projects to start that was to try to implement an HRIS, or Human Resources Information System, and timekeeping system. So for around a year or two, that was my main project at that company. And then once we finally designed that, implemented it, trained it, rolled it out, that was pretty much my job. So that consisted of making sure the system worked, troubleshooting it, reporting, and that's how I kind of got into the HRIS field. From there, I essentially just started owning that system and owning all the HR systems, making sure that they all spoke to one another. Started to hone in on how to report, how to build reports, how to analyze reports, because it was all off the data that the system that I helped create generated. So that's how I developed all those HR IM skills, and that's what I do now as a HRIS data analyst. I would say the most difficult part was probably coming out of college. A lot of students don't know what they specifically want to do in HR. Some, they love the idea of HR, but they don't know if they want to get into recruiting or benefits or staff and labor or employee relations. So coming out of college, I really like being the front-facing human resources. So those are the ones who are taking the calls. They're the ones sitting down and consulting with the employees, being the first point of reference for HR, really having that first-person contact and communication with your customers. And then switching to HRIS, or Human Resources Information Systems, a lot of your duties end up being behind the scenes of generating reports and analyzing things that you're not necessarily helping out a customer. You're kind of making sure that the systems that they're using are working and they're up to code, and helping everybody in a back-end kind of way. So I would say the hardest thing for me was changing from the front-facing to the back-end kind of work, where you're not really speaking to the customer, but you're helping them out. What I would kind of associate it with is, going from the front end of the house to the back end of the house. If it's kind of comparing it to a restaurant, it's going from being a server and actually speaking with all your customers versus cooking the food in the back of the house. So my primary job responsibilities obviously includes keeping the systems up to speed. So that is troubleshooting if people have issues, because whenever you're in a systems role, you realize that everybody will use the system every way they're not supposed to. So it's always to troubleshoot to make sure everybody's using it correctly, or if there really is a bug, to try to fix it. Always trying to enhance the products as well. So if you sit down with somebody in the recruiting department, they say that they need a business process to change so that it has an additional level of approval, it's figuring out how to build that level of approval into the system so that it's a much more streamlined process that makes everything a little easier. It's enhancing the system, it's troubleshooting it, it's maintaining it to make sure that everything's up to speed. A lot of programs tend to want to update themselves if they're cloud versions of systems, so it's making sure that with every update, all of your configuration still works. Another big part of the responsibilities that I have is reporting. So again, it's taking all that information out of the systems that I own, generating it, massaging the information to try to get an end result that I can present it to whoever's asking. So whether it be, can I have a list of new hires, to something along the lines of, can you project how many new hires we're going to need based off of the economy in 5 years? So not just taking a bunch of names and putting it in a spreadsheet, but also doing analysis and presenting that to the end user so that they can make business decisions out of it. And the other part is consulting with customers. So if the recruiting department or the benefits department need something, it's not just giving them the easiest, quickest way possible, but it's really sitting down with them to see what they're trying to get out of it. Is it something that can be solved with a report? Is it something that can be solved with a business process in the system? Is it something that can be resolved with maybe getting a new system or looking at something a different way? So it's really trying to figure out how we can get data to them the fastest, easiest way. Being in HRIS, you obviously own systems that include how new hires get into the system, how you do pay changes, how you terminate employees, what training classes people are taking, so on and so forth. So the way that my job really connects with other departments is through, I would say, consulting more than anything else, where again, if the benefits department says, hey, can you send me a report of everybody who picked the high deductible health plan in last year's open enrollment, I would then go into our benefit systems, try to pull all that information into whatever way they needed to try to give them the correct answer of what they're actually asking. So a lot of how we overlap is getting the results that people want based off of reports in the systems or dashboards or something along those lines. Other ways as well is consulting to, again, try to streamline some of their processes. So if the same example, if our benefits team wants a new way to do open enrollment, or based off of last year's feedback, they heard that a lot of people had issues logging into the system to actually do open enrollment, it's really maybe getting some requirements from the benefits department to see what the issues were last year, working with the vendor to improve, to fix those issues so that it's much more easy that year. So or it's much more easy and then up in the next coming open enrollment. So our job is actually really to help everybody else out. I would say that HRIM is really one of the support groups that we wouldn't really have positions if the other departments didn't need the information that we provided them. So. With HRIM, again, a lot of our systems are via the cloud, so you're logging into a website, and that's how that's where you actually use the system. We do have a lot of connections to those cloud systems, so that's how we do all of our reporting in the warehouse. But all of these cloud systems, they always have updates, whether it be monthly, quarterly, biannually, or annually. They always have these updates that they first put in your sandbox or test environment, and they want you to test as much as possible to make sure that when they do apply those changes to the production system, that it doesn't, you don't experience any issues, or something doesn't work or something doesn't look right once they put it into the production system. So the main challenge we have is that testing these systems takes a long time, and you can try to test as much as possible, but there's always going to be some areas that you just never even thought to test, or that you not overlooked, but kind of down the road where it worked with the interface but it didn't work with the report, so on and so forth. So the challenge that we struggle with is with how many updates there are with all these different systems, and the complexity of how these systems talk to one another, and how much you can do within the systems and the complexity of our custom configurations, a lot of our job ends up being testing to make sure that the systems still work when all these updates come down. So it's always going to be an ongoing battle, because at the end of the day, the updates are there for a reason, to either fix something or to improve the system, but it's on us to make sure that with everything positive that it's doing, it's not messing up anything that has worked previously. There was a couple, and I'm sure that everybody who asked probably has mentioned that everybody always makes mistakes. We're all human. If your bosses and supervisors should always be there to help you get over those mistakes, but they are going to happen. So it's all about how you bounce back from them and figure out a way to make them better. One specific instance I had is when I was assisting with our benefits enrollment process. And typically what happens is, after open enrollment, once that closes, you get one large file of here's everybody and here's the benefits plans that they've taken, and here's a number with their employee ID and the amount of their new deduction, and that deduction is what goes into payroll that then takes that specific amount out of your gross paycheck. So at that point in time, we did not have an automated way to do it, so we had to really calculate it by hand. And being new at the way we had to process that, my math skills of a deduction being a negative number that's being put into the system, somehow after we calculated everything, it ended up double deducting, having two positives equal a negative. So once we processed that payroll file, we realized that we shortchanged a lot, over a couple hundred employees with double deductions. So after we got a couple calls, and then once we got a couple calls, it made us raise our hands. Then we started to figure out what was wrong. I went back to the calculations file. We realized that we did a calculation wrong that ended up double deducting benefits from all these employees. So we went back to the main upload spreadsheet, found the group of people that had these issues, and then what we did is we did a lot of analysis to say, all right, over the next 2 or 3 paychecks, can we slowly increase, or can we retroactive add additional monies to these people's paychecks to finally make them whole. And over a month-long process of a couple bi-weekly pays, we ended up making everybody whole. And then we realized in the future that to calculate deductions, you really have to take the double negative equaling a positive into consideration. So to make a long story short, once we figured out all the paychecks were wrong, we went back to the source file. We figured out the group of employees that were affected by the change. Then we went back to see how much we have to give them to make them whole based off of what their standard pay was supposed to be, and then we applied those monies to the next pay. So after everybody was finally back whole, my boss, we sat down, we said, all right, how can we make sure that this does not happen in the future? So we put some processes and protocols into place to make sure that we really wrote out every line to calculate what's what, to make sure that we had a step-by-step procedure of how to do it in the future.